Hi, I'm Jim Boardman from Palo Alto Networks Academy, and this is the 13th video in a series of videos dedicated to students competing at CCDC competitions. The purpose of the series is to show you how to deploy and configure a VM100 on an ESXi host to protect your virtual servers that are also running on the same ESXi host. In this video, I'm going to cover the topics security zones and security policies. But before we get started, let's review where we are. Okay, this should be a familiar slide, and we showed this in all the other previous videos. And basically what we've done is we've already configured, we've installed our VM100, we have set up our interfaces, we've created a two-zone firewall, right? So this isn't, you can have as many zones, so that's what we're going to talk about in this video, but you can have as many zones as you have interfaces to match the zones. So you could set this up to be a three-zone. I've set this up very simply as a two-zone firewall. But you could, using the same setup guidance that I provided in the video series, set this up as a three-zone firewall, in which case you would have an untrust zone, trust zone, perhaps a DMZ zone for your public servers. In this case, we've set it up as two-zone. We put our public servers behind in the trust zone. And in the last video, we set up destination NATs so that from a network basis, you can reach your public services, your public servers running your public services. Traffic would go through the firewall via the destination NAT. What we haven't done, though, is we haven't set up the security policy to allow the type of traffic that we want to allow through our firewall. So that's what we're going to be directing our efforts on in the next few videos coming up. So let's go over to the firewall now and see where we are on the firewall user interface. All right, we'll start with the network tab, and we'll center our review over the network tab and the policies tab. So in the network tab, again, we've set up a simple two-interface firewall, two-zone firewall, with an untrust zone and a trust zone. Again, you can set this up so you have three interfaces if you wanted to do that and set up a three-zone firewall. But for simplicity purposes, I just wanted to set it up very simple, very basic, because that's the golden rule when you're in a competition. You don't want to do things too complex, and you want to have a thorough understanding of what you're doing before you bridge over to the complex solutions. So as you can see here, I have I've assigned, this is my external interface connected to my untrust zone. We've already assigned IP addresses here. We have 3 IP addresses. These match our destination NAT policies, which I'll be reviewing here shortly. We know we've also set it up so we're only doing ping. We're allowing ping from a troubleshooting standpoint. Here's my zone. I'm in the untrust zone. And as you can see here, you're probably not going to see this on your firewall unless you add Global Protect. Global Protect is a way in which I can extend the protection of my firewall to other devices as long as I have a path to them. I'm not going to cover Global Protect, but I bring it up at this point in time because in this series of videos, I may have a dedicated video for this. I will have a dedicated video for this, setting this up. But it is an easy way in which I can extend the protection of the firewall to other hosts that are connected, that I can connect to, that I have a route to. All right, so on my internal interface, this is, again, we've got the management profile in this case. I'm allowing full management. We've already set this up so that I can manage it from the inside. I've set up my internal IP address. I'm going to be, and I've assigned, notice that we have assigned to the same virtual router. We have to do that. And I'm in the trust zone, simple two-zone firewall. And as you can see here, I also set up DHCP. So that's a signature of the symbol for DHCP. So now if we go over to our policies, what I've done so far is really only in the NAT side of the house. So I've set up 3 destination NAT policies to match my services that are running on my trust zone. These are services that I'm publicly providing. So I'm using the external addresses that I've assigned to Ethernet 1.1. I'm using those as my destination address because that's where I'm allowing the public basically the idea of it is to make a connection through my firewall. So in order to enable that, I have to use the external interface IP addressing of my firewalls. In this case, I have 3 of them, 60, 70, and 80. I have different services running for each one. For each service, I have to set up a separate destination NAT policy. I've also set up a source NAT policy, as you can see here. This is for traffic going from my trusted side to my untrusted side. I've done all this. Can I pass traffic? That's the question. And the answer to that is no, I cannot pass traffic until I've set up my security policy to allow those applications I want to allow from my inside to the outside and from the outside to the inside. We have not done that. As you can see here, I have 2 default policies that are already set up. And with intrazone, that is if I'm within the same zone, all traffic is allowed by default. If traffic is between zones, let's say going from my trust zone to my untrust zone, that traffic is blocked by default. So I would have to create and add rules, which we're going to be doing here in this video and in subsequent videos. So one of the first things that you have to define is what type of rule is it, rule type, and this deals with zones. So let's go over to the slides where we can take a more detailed look at rule type and zones. Okay, as I've said at the outset, is you can have more than one zone. In this case, we set up a simple 2-zone firewall, but you can create as many zones as you want. The rule of thumb is that an interface has to be assigned to a zone, okay, in order to pass traffic in a firewall appliance. I can have, in one zone, I can have multiple interfaces assigned to a zone. I cannot assign more than one zone to an interface. So here again is just what we scrapped, what we saw over at the firewall are my default policies, which are defined. We talked about this before. All firewalls, I used to tell my students this, all firewalls pretty much operate the same. A packet comes in and it's matched against, and it tries to find a match with one of your security policy rules. It doesn't matter if it's an ACL, it doesn't matter if it's an IP tables firewall, it doesn't matter which type of firewall vendor you're using. This is pretty much the way firewalls work. So if I find a match, then the action of the match is what's completed. So in this case, if it matched one of these applications, I would allow that traffic to go through, or a firewall would allow that traffic to go through. So if it doesn't find a match, then it defaults to the default policy, which we've defined here. If it's between zones, then it's blocked. If it's with zone, it's going to be allowed. So there are 3 different types of zones that you can use, okay? Zone types, I should say, that you can use when you create a security policy rule. The first one is universal. This is the default zone type. So with universal, that means that this rule, which has the applications that I'm defining, this rule allows intrazone and interzone traffic, covers both, as you can see here when I go through it. So I can go between zones with a universal type, as you can see here, and I can also go, the rule also covers traffic within the same zone. So this would be, if I wanted to modify my intrazone rule, maybe I'd want to be able to have rules that cover intrazone traffic, but by default, all intrazone traffic is allowed. You can change that default action if you want to. And again, going between zones as well as going within zones. So here's intrazone. Intrazone defines traffic that are within the same zone. So this rule would only cover traffic going from zone A to zone A, from zone B to zone B. So one of the things that you can, when the rule type is really important if you have more than one zone in a security policy. If you're just using a single source and a single destination zone, then universal is going to cover everything you need. But if you have multiple zones in your firewall policy, security policy, which you can do, then you may want to consider defining what type of zone you're going to use, whether it's going to be interzone, or universal. So interzone, same idea. It's only covering traffic between, well, not same idea, but it's only covering traffic between different zones. So this is only covering traffic. This rule only will cover traffic from zone A to zone B, and from zone B to zone A. Okay, so that's all I really wanted to cover in this video. In the next video, we'll talk about application flow and security policy.